Thank you very much for agreeing to do this, by the way.
Pleasure, absolute delight.
Hello, you join us here at Ignite 2018, of course, the world's largest B2B marketing event, live from London. We're with the Crocodile, of course, which is the official live streaming partner of the event, and I'm with Rory Sutherland. Now, Rory just gave the keynote. He's the Vice Chairman of Ogilvy Group UK. Rory, thank you very much for joining us. You're the father of behavioural science when it comes to marketing. That's quite an accolade. What do you think that means?
To be absolutely honest, I attribute quite a bit of it to luck and timing. Now, very, very early on, I started in direct marketing and as a B2B and direct marketing copywriter as far back as 1990. I joined Ogilvy in 1988. Very rapidly through testing, I discovered there were seemingly trivial or irrelevant aspects to creative execution which would have an absolutely monumental effect on the efficacy of the communication. Mm-hmm. So I think I was a kind of behavioral scientist avant la lettre, in that I always believed there needed to be far more investigation into this phenomenon than there had been. And the really happy accident was that sometime in, I think, the early 2000s, I was ill for about 5 or 6 days with a really unpleasant, you don't need to know, a stomach infection, okay? And you don't need the details there. And out of boredom, I just sat down and started reading economics books, and then got onto economics blogs, and discovered that a book was being published called Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, who are two of the godfathers of behavioral economics. In fact, Richard won the Nobel Prize for Economics last year, I think, or this year, in fact. And finally, this was what I called the missing science, the science I've been looking for all my life. Strangely, although I'm a creative in advertising, my family has a scientific background, my brother's an astronomer, and I was always convinced there was far more room for scientific inquiry, and at the very least codifying some of these behaviors. And the great thing I've always found is that, by happy accident, I always describe consumer marketing and B2B marketing. It's the Galapagos Islands for understanding human behavior, because you get fairly generous budgets to test and to perform experiments at quite a large scale. And so I'd always had these instinctive beliefs that certain techniques worked, but I'd found it impossible to justify them. And the great thing with behavioral science and behavioral economics is, apart from anything else, apart from the scientific contribution, it also gave us a vocabulary with which we could explain what we were doing, rather than merely going in and just going, look, based on my experience, it kind of feels right. Subsequently, I think we feel really, really vindicated, because genuinely you can go into a business with the mindset of a behavioral scientist combined with the mindset of a creative, and you can discover, £2 or £3 million worth of untapped value in an afternoon.
Okay, so how do you practically implement the learnings that you've taken from behavioural science into marketing?
First of all, nearly everybody, particularly in B2B in fact, tends to use economic logic as their mental tube map for human behaviour. Okay? And like the tube map, it's not actually a map, the tube map, it's actually a schematic diagram. And the tube map is useful because it's comprehensible. It's not wholly inaccurate, but it's a gross distortion of London. I mean, if you take it even further, railway lines don't appear on the tube map, so South London, as far as the tube's concerned, is a tiny vestigial thing along the banks of the Thames. Yeah. And the tube map distorts your perception of London in the same way that economic thinking distorts your perception of human behaviour. And the first thing I do in any methodology is go in and go, what would an economist be assuming here which they might be wrong about?
And what do you tend to find, that people are wrong about, and what advice would you give to any B2B marketer?
There are lots of things they're wrong about. One, they're trying to describe laws of human behaviour as though humans were like atoms. Now, quite a lot of physicists have pointed this out. How difficult would physics be if atoms could think? Okay, and it's a grotesque oversimplification of human motivation. And human motivation and deep motivation, what a colleague of mine in New York calls the real why of human behavior, is deep, it's opaque to introspection, it generally isn't very well understood even by ourselves. And so the quest for the real why of why are people doing this or why are they not doing it, independent of why they may claim they're not doing something, is immensely creatively liberating. Now, sometimes you fail. Sometimes you have an instinct and you're wrong. However, the freedom to test, which is outside direct marketing, a great newfound freedom in a large part of marketing, means that the need to fall back on a rational default is far less than it used to be. Mm-hmm. The cost and the downside risk of testing counterintuitive options is much, much lower because you can fail fast and stop early. Mm-hmm. Or you can do it at a very small scale. The upside gains of abandoning the economic tube map can at times be absolutely monumental. And I occasionally call this the broken binoculars, just to mix my analogies further, that nearly all business decision making, and as I said, in a business-to-business environment, because in B2B, the myth of buyer rationality is even more persistent and pervasive than it is in B2C. Essentially, people tend to use two tools to understand the consumer or the buyer. And one of them is economic theory, and the other one is market research. What recent advances in psychology tell us is that neither of them is completely wrong. Sometimes we do know why we do things. Sometimes our explanation of our emotional state is actually accurate. But in both cases, both economics and indeed market research, there are enormous holes. In particular, there's a great book by Timothy D. Wilson called Strangers to Ourselves. We don't really know the reasons we do or don't do what we do. We respond behaviorally to an emotion and then we post-rationalize the reason for the emotion. Sometimes the post-rationalization is accurate, most of the time it isn't, really.
Rory, it's absolutely fascinating stuff, and I really could talk to you about it all afternoon. There's so many implications, I suppose, from what you're doing, and it's really groundbreaking work. Rory Sutherland, thank you so much for joining us. Rory, if I could just get to step through there, thank you very much, sir. And coming in now, Scott Ivell. So Scott is the UK Marketing Director of Salesforce, and he's going to be chatting to us a little bit about why he's here today. So Scott, if I could just get to step in, it's good to meet you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So Scott, if I could just get you to just come over here a little, we'll snuggle up a little bit closer. So Scott Ivell is the UK Marketing Director of Salesforce, and Scott, firstly, what value does coming to an event like Ignite 2018 provide for you?
Well, both on a personal level and on a professional level, I have a passion for hearing from my peers, from professional marketeers. So I'm looking forward to listening and learning today. I've been thinking a lot lately about some of the challenges, this fourth industrial revolution we talk about, the rise in intelligent technology. So I'm particularly interested in hearing about what marketers think about that, how they're going to rise to the challenges, and hopefully take some learnings away that we can use in both my personal life and our marketing.
And could you explain to us the key role that Salesforce plays in B2B marketing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Salesforce has been going about 19 years now, and since day one we focused on making advanced technology easy and put that in the hands of the everyday worker. So almost democratizing it, and marketing's been a big part of that journey for us. Particularly as we see the lines between marketing, service, sales and communities blurring. So we see our role as making that process simple, surfacing all the information that a marketer needs to build targeted, relevant interactions with their target markets. We've also been working a lot recently on something called Einstein, which is our artificial intelligence layer across all of our products. Because really the future for marketers is augmented. Right? It's a big part of our strategy now is to help marketers be more efficient, more creative, and I guess more personal.
So that's where you see the future of B2B marketing is that augmented step.
That's part of it. Rory made a great point earlier on, which is as marketers, we need to find the balance between driving execution, and automation is a big part of that, but also making sure that we are creative. And technology has a good track record actually in releasing people from the day-to-day activities, trusting that those interactions are happening at scale, and then spending more time investing in creative ideas. So it's very exciting as long as we get that balance right.
And today, of course, you'll be bringing your expert opinion to a panel about how marketers can make it to the top. Are there any top tips you can share with us now, so sneak previews?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm quite at the top. That suggests it's the end of the journey. So for me, I'm going to talk about my journey a little bit more. One of the things I'm going to talk to actually is a quote by Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. So he was asked the question of, how is technology going to change over the next 10 years? And his answer was, you should ask me, how is it not going to change? What's going to be consistent over the next 10 years? Because that's the foundation for a business. And as a marketeer, that's really the foundation for our careers, is think about what's not going to change. A commitment to ongoing learning, making sure that we understand our customers and we have deep insights into why our customers buy, and ultimately developing that into our careers. Okay. So technology is great, but there are some foundational things that really we need to take care of as well. So that's going to be one of my key messages.
That's really interesting. So I suppose Jeff Bezos' point is that don't focus on the unquantifiable, focus on what you can know, and then take the rest as it comes.
Exactly. Build a foundation on what's going to be stable. Customers are always going to want personal, value-based interactions, and that's a great place to start in your career.
Scott Ivell, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure talking to you, Scott.
And you, thanks for your time.
Scott is, of course, the UK Marketing Director for Salesforce. And coming up very shortly, you can join us at 11:30 for the MD of the Crocodile, Jason Talbot, talking customer experience. See you soon.